In this lesson, we're going to be creating the procedural textures for our zombie carcass. Okay, so to get started, we already have one texture over here for our live action background plate, but we need to create some other types of textures for the other parts of our carcass. I'm going to disable our camera for a second, so we're just looking through just kind of the perspective camera here, and we'll rotate around so we can get a little bit closer and maybe have a better look at what we're working with here. So it looks like we've got a few pieces of skin or something here that this spine pokes through. We've got this large piece of skin kind of over the top of the ribs. We've got the ribs and the spine, which would probably have the same kind of texture on it. Then we've got several different types of intestines here. Some are a little bit thicker, some are a little bit thinner, so we can take that into consideration. And then it looks like we've got about 3 organs, kind of this one, and this one. So we could say maybe this one is something like the heart, and then maybe something light and dark over here. So with all of those different things in mind that we need to create textures for, let's get started. So I'll create the first one by just making a new material. We'll double click that. And for this one, let's just start with something kind of easy. We'll do the bone. So we need to come up with a color for this. So I'll just go ahead and click here in the color. And I want it to be kind of a yellowish color, something right in here, just like that. And then we'll bring this up here a little bit. Right in there, just kind of a light yellow sort of color. Perfect. Go ahead and say okay to that. And then we need to put a bump map on this. So let's go ahead and check on the bump. We'll select that and we'll pick a texture from all our different choices. And I'm going to choose, let's go ahead and just choose noise. And obviously this is a little bit too grainy. Really, this looks more like brains than bone at this point. So we'll go ahead and click this and let's go in here and change this a little bit. So maybe change the noise type. This Booyah one is nice because it has so much more black in it that it gets a little bit finer, grittier texture to it. And you can turn up the scale if it's a little bit too fine for you. If you want it to be a little bit larger, little bumps on there, maybe just around 200%. That looks pretty good. Okay, and let's go back out to our bump. It might, just having the strength at 20% I think is good. You can turn it up or down if you want to, but we can leave it there. If you turn it all the way up, you can see it gets a little too strong. So I think 20% is actually a pretty good place for that to sit. Okay, so we've got our bump taken care of. Let's go into our specular because that's checking on by default, but it's probably a little too intense, a little too shiny. This looks like a pretty healthy bone, and we probably want it to look a little more dry, so not quite so shiny. So let's go in here and first of all turn our brightness down. Maybe just a little bit right in there so that it's not so bright to begin with. And we can turn the width down, which is going to make it a little bit tighter, almost to where it looks shinier, but we can turn the height way down, which is really going to just flatten that right out. The height will make a big difference there. Okay, and I'll just leave the fall off and inner width alone. So you can see not so much specular anymore. So now what you can do is go ahead and actually open up that zombie guts null object so that you can see all of these. And you could go ahead and drop on the texture if you want to. So we'll drop that one onto skeleton and you can see what that looks like. Now we can also open up our render, interactive render region and kind of get an idea of what this actually looks like, because sometimes you can't really tell whenever you're just in this perspective view. So you can see maybe a little bit more grit on there than what you saw out here. We don't really have this lit at all yet, so it's going to be kind of hard to tell any major changes. But let's go ahead and move on to our next texture. I want to create a texture now for, let's say, the large intestines. So we'll go ahead and create a new material. And we'll double click to go into that material. And this time in the color, instead of just picking a regular color, I want to load up a texture for this. So let's click this here, this little flyout, and we'll choose noise again. And let's choose maybe a different type of noise instead of just this regular noise. If we click this, we can go into that noise, and there's one just right below my recording area right here that has kind of a really just veiny look to it, which I think is good for what we're trying to create here with those large intestines. And we can turn up that global scale. Let's turn it up to like 275 or something like that. There we go. A little too high. Okay, and let's also go into our reflection here. And this is going to be some pretty reflective intestines. I want them to be not so much reflective, but maybe more shiny. So we can change that. Instead of just checking on reflection and having them be like a mirror, we'll be able to see maybe a little bit of the reflection only on the outside if we change this texture here. So if we click this flat and choose Fresnel, you can see that that reflection is more on the edges, and so we can still see all of that nice texture in the middle that we've been changing. So let's maybe turn our mix strength down a little bit though, not because I want it to look this bright, but because if I then turn down the brightness overall, you kind of use those together to start to really see a decrease in that overall. So I think that looks a little bit better. You can tell if I check that on or off, it's mostly just adding that little highlight. Now we're not getting like a mirror reflection. Let's go back up to color and maybe play with that a little bit more. So in the color field here, I think we've added this texture. Let's click on that. Let's change these colors of the texture right here instead of that main color at the top. So if I click the black one, let's make this kind of a reddish color. So we'll come in here, maybe make it kind of darker, just right in there, maybe even a little bit further down. Right in there, really, really dark red kind of a color. And it's hard to tell at first how this changes it, but now if we go into the white part and let's make this maybe kind of a lighter color, just right in here, just kind of a light, almost grayish pink. There we go. You can see how now this has the look of some kind of older biomatter, which is perfect for our zombie to mix those two colors together. Okay, let's also take a look at our bump map. So we'll check that on and we'll go in and load up a noise texture here. And obviously that's way too noisy, so we'll go ahead and click that. And I'm going to change the noise again from just the regular noise to the booyah because it's got the black background with the little white dots, so it's a lot less bumpy than that regular noise. And I'm also going to turn up the global scale though, so those bumps are going to be bigger. Let's turn it up to something like 600%. Okay, that looks pretty good. And let's go into our specular. And let's turn our width down a little bit. And let's turn the height up a little bit. So this is going to help to make a tighter specular that's a lot more visible. And then if you want to, you could change the brightness. I'm going to go ahead and leave mine at 100, and we won't mess with the fall off in the inner width. Okay, so that is our specular for the large intestines. Let's go ahead and name this large intestines. And also, we probably should go in and name this one bone. Okay. Perfect. So we've got those two textures made, and then you can start to drop this on some of the other pieces. So let's maybe drop that one on there, and it's up to you if you want to drop it on, you see, to the inside of some of these large intestines, or if you want to drop it on the hypernerves, it's still going to apply it both ways. You can see it's still there. So it's totally up to you, whatever you think is easier. I actually kind of like having it on the polygon one, especially for something we're going to do later in the course. I like having those tags all in the same place since we don't have any tags on the hypernerves at this point. Okay, so now really quickly I want to show you how we can duplicate the large intestines to quickly create some small intestines by just changing a couple of settings. So to duplicate it really quickly, we can just control drag this over here, and we'll double click, and this one let's call small intestines. There we go. And we'll go into the color, and you will go into your texture just by clicking that texture swatch, and let's just change the colors very, very slightly. So this one, maybe this one's reversed a little bit, so the lighter color comes first. So with the same texture, that's going to give you a slightly different result. So we'll put that lighter one here, and then for color 2, let's do something that's still kind of dark but not quite as dark as what we had before. So maybe just bring that down a little bit. Maybe this one up here, let's make just a little bit more pink. So I'm going to pull that up a little bit higher towards that red, okay? And this one, let's make darker. There we go. Now we can see that a little bit better. So just barely changing something like that can really quickly give you a very different look. And you could also go in and change the bump map. So let's go into our noise again and just change the noise type. So we were at booyah, let's change it to gaseous. So that's just very slightly going to change the texture that's on top of that. So then we can go in and grab that texture and apply it to those smaller intestines, and then maybe drop it on somewhere else inside of here just to kind of add to that change in color. And we can just keep dropping those different types on just to give it, you see how now that looks very varied in its appearance. And I think that's all the intestines. I think we textured all of them by dropping those on there. So now we have a few other textures to make for the organs and the heart and the skin. So we'll come back in the next lesson and finish up those last few textures, and then we'll be ready to start animating.